Modern Railways. In-depth railway news.
Hello and welcome to the preview of the March edition of Modern Railways. There's the cover. We're taking another look at the integrated rail plan. I haven't commented on it in my column other than to suggest that the eastern leg of HS2 will be built eventually. I didn't comment on it because I thought it could have been a lot worse. It's no good going on about a rolling programme of electrification when we can barely have the resources to progress the two schemes we have got, and at least we hung on to those. Maybe we might get more if we can underspend the budget for a change. It is a bit much demanding more spending when lots of people can't even pay their gas bill. Still, over to the editor to tell you more about the IRP now we've had time to think about it. Philip.
Thanks Ian, and hello everyone. We do a lot of themed issues in Modern Railways where we look at a particular bit of railway geography or a particular topic, and this issue is no exception. And we're focusing on the West Coast Main Line, often called the Premier Line. Obviously it connects centres of particular importance and also is a major artery for freight. So it's definitely worthy of our focus. The starting point was, of course, the West Coast Mainline operator, Avanti West Coast. And as usual with these interviews, we start off with COVID recovery, rebuilding timetables and marketing and so on. But Avanti's also got lots more going on. There's the refurbishment of the Pendolino fleet. The first of those should be out during March and back into service. And then there's new trains from Hitachi on the way as well. And plus there's some future plans in terms of timetables, and the operator's really trying to look forward beyond and out of COVID. Then we look at West Coast Mainline South, so that's one of the three network rail routes within North West and Central region, which was specifically set up to look at this key artery and to keep it running well. And there's been some historic issues with the maintenance of the infrastructure that Network Rail has worked really hard to address. And that's been done through a series of, particularly on West Coast Mainline South, more than anywhere else, blockades taken at short notice during times of reduced demand during COVID. And that's been a great success story. But that's the now. What about the future? Well, the West Coast is going to have major interactions with HS2. So we speak to the passenger director at North West and Central, Dave Penny, about those. We start at Euston. And clearly there's going to be a new high-speed terminus for the HS2 trains there. But what about the conventional station alongside it? Well, the plans for those two are being developed in partnership, and we zone in on what's going to happen to the conventional station, where some quite exciting plans are being developed, some quite radical plans, and it's a really significant project that's taking shape there. And we should hear more about that when the final business case goes through this summer. And then if you hop up the line to Crewe, then that's a major point for HS2 as well. It's where phase 2A will end, so trains will come out of the tunnel and join the main line into Crewe station, which is going to need to be extensively reconfigured. It's part of a wider modernisation, as re-signalling is also due there at that time. So there's a major project at Crewe, and that also needs to look north as well, because phase 2B will then take a high-speed line further on from Crewe towards Manchester and to join up to the West Coast Main Line further north. And that then takes us on to West Coast Main Line North. And this is the bit that isn't funded, but which is widely accepted as something that we need to do. That's upgrading the railway through Preston and so on up to Carlisle and the Scottish border. And so we discuss aspirations for that. Now, a major headline in early 2021 was the takeover by Alstom of Bombardier's transportation business. So after a year, how's it all going? Well, I spoke to UK and Ireland Managing Director Nick Crossfield to get a sense of that. Now, clearly the Adventure programme, which Alstom's inherited from Bombardier, is a major part of this. But we have a wide-ranging interview which focuses on the recent HS2 success and looks at, as well as trains at infrastructure, fortunes for the Derby site, signalling, electrification. So it's quite wide-ranging, and I hope you find it of interest. Now, the integrated rail plan, has provoked a lot of controversy in many quarters since its publication back in November. Back in January, the Department for Transport published the Mott-MacDonald report into strategic alternatives to the High Speed 2 Phase 2B Eastern Leg. So we've been scrutinising that, and the impression that we're getting from talking to sources is actually there might be more to this than meets the eye in terms of the options presented in the Mott-MacDonald report. So is the Phase 2B Eastern Leg plan, as originally set out, the best way to serve that side of the country, and crucially at this time, does it offer best value for money? The Mott-MacDonald report causes us to question that, and at the same time, Network Rail Chief Executive Andrew Haynes has railed at those who've criticised the IRP, saying it's not helpful to criticise such a significant package of investment. So, a really interesting environment for us to be working in, and maybe a slight shift of opinion. See what you think of our coverage in this issue. I hope you'll find it interesting and thought-provoking. There's lots of other news going on, but I will make mention of one particular item, and that's that TransPennine Express has launched a tender exercise for some new locomotives to replace the Class 68s it uses to haul its Mark 5A carriages on its Nova 3 sets. The Class 68s have caused some problems, particularly at Scarborough during overnight maintenance due to noise complaints. So TPE is seeking a solution both to that and to the obvious issues of diesel emissions. There's an option in the tender as well for 5 locos to replace Class 57s on Great Western Railway's Night Riviera Sleeper. TPE and GW are obviously sister companies, and the TPE managing director happens to be someone who spent a lot of time in senior roles at Great Western. So my colleague Tony Mars has spoken to TPE's fleet director Paul Staples about why they're doing this and what they're hoping to achieve. So quite interesting, in particular the fact that the performance of the tri-mode Class 93s that Rail Operations UK has ordered from Stadler has been modelled as part of this exercise. Could they provide a solution? We'll have to wait and see, but it's definitely an interesting one to watch. So a very busy issue as ever. 100 pages packed full of news, features, analysis, and much more besides. So I do hope you enjoy it. And we'll be back again in a month's time for the April issue. Thanks very much, and back over to you, Ian.
Thank you, Philip. Right, plenty of good stuff there. Now, to cheer you all up, here is Roger to stir into the abyss. Roger.
Well, hello again. At the moment, I'm researching the next in our series of reviews looking back at modern railways 6 decades, and this time it's the 1970s. And I'm finding that the similarities with today are surprisingly strong. For example, back in the early 1970s, there was great concern over the affordability of the railway and what it was costing. And British Rail was also preparing for a massive change in management structure. And this month, guess what? The leading item in the column is costs. I start looking at the impact of COVID on the train operating companies, and what it's done to their revenues, ridership, and how things have changed. The optimistic part is that, of course, we've now got numbers, we've now got the official financial details of what happened after the end of the first COVID wave in August last year. And ridership was rising quite well before it was hit on the head by Plan B and the Omicron virus in December. And if I extrapolate that and look at where the revenue might return. On cost saving, it's not easy for the train operating companies to cut costs because so many are fixed, like train leases and track access charges and so on. But I look at where they might save costs and how much could be saved by voluntary severance schemes, for example. Finally, I have a stab at how fast revenue and ridership could come back. And I reckon we could be back at about 80% of pre-COVID normal by the end of the year. From there, I move on to Network Rail, where once again, cost saving is not that easy. In fact, costs have been rising steadily over the last 10 years or so, and the headcount has gone up by a fair number. They have a voluntary severance scheme too, which I give the numbers of how many have responded, but at the same time, redundancies are going to be necessary in management, the aim being to get back to about 2017 levels. Cost saving in Network Rail isn't that easy because obviously maintenance, you can't skimp on that. And funding for renewals is guaranteed by the Office of Rail Regulator every 5 years under the usual plan. But as a result, in a control period, it seems the revenue, the payment is fixed. Now, back in the days of an integrated railway, whenever the government called for a cut across the board, both the infrastructure and the operations side saved money. So I raised the heretical thought that perhaps we could slow down on renewals where Network Rail has been taking advantage of the lighter traffic levels due to timetable cutbacks to actually spend more on renewals. That may well get me some rude remarks in the letters column. The complete change of tack after that, an alert reader, spotted the Hitachi test train with the modifications to the yaw damper brackets following the cracking crisis which emerged last year. These are excellent photographs, so I've got an extended illustrated section analysing what Hitachi has done, but I also compare it with the similar installations of yaw damper brackets and yaw damper attachments and other manufacturers' trains. And the conclusion is that this is a real belt and braces job on the 800 series Hitachi trains, and who can blame them given that this is part of a 27.5-year contract. So if you're going to make modifications to it, fix it once and for all. And then I mentioned earlier that British Rail back in the 70s was planning a massive management reorganisation. Well, of course, we are in the early stages of a management change with the creation of Great British Railways and a single guiding mind for the whole industry. I've looked at a couple of items which I think really are distractions. That's the whole industry strategic plan and the government's competition to find a home for the new GBR headquarters. The GBR headquarters is obviously a lightweight issue, particularly when we're still waiting to get details of the legislation needed to actually institute Great British Railways. But what's my objection to the whole industry strategic plan? Well, I'd go back through my archives, which I often do in these cases, and looked at what happened to earlier plans. And the research for the review of the 70s shows that British Rail produced its first strategic plan back in 1971. And ever since then, strategic plans just don't survive contact with reality. The classic example was the 1991 10-year plan that British Rail produced, and within 5 years it didn't exist anymore because of privatisation. So, bit of controversy there, I hope, and something to interest everybody. See you again.
Thank you, Roger. Of course, for us XBR people, the idea of being told to make a 10% saving every couple of years was standard practice. Usually we did it too, with some inconveniences, but we did it. The funny thing for us oldies is that 20 years have gone by when we are not told to make a 10% cut. We seem to have got to the point where infrastructure budgets were just seen as a starting point rather than the number anyone expected to end up with. But now spending cuts are very difficult. Oh, so very difficult. It's all those contracts, you see. There's an idea. Get rid of the contracts and the people writing them. Okay, I know it isn't really that easy, but really, how can it be more difficult to reduce costs when they have increased 3 or 4 times over the last 20 years? Rant over. Now, my Pan Up column. This month I've got 2 offerings. The first one about some of the trains I bought when in my Porterbrook days, the cross-country Turbo Stars. They were fitted with MyTrack remote comms at build, but this was not very well utilised. That was partly because the all-important data processing was done as an add-on service by Bombardier. This was fine for high-value services, but it didn't really make a good business case for Turbostar cross-country routes. Now, Porterbrook and Cross Country have got together and come up with a more affordable system, using a third party to do the data management. Be interested to see if it brings a spanner to the trophy case at Tyseley. My main article is about one of my pet hates: discontinuous electrification. I often make throwaway remarks about this, which kind of assumes that all readers know what a stupid idea it is. But this zombie project keeps on staggering to its feet for another wedge of research cash. So you might well ask, if it's such a stupid idea, why do we keep spending money on it? I'll answer that question in the article, along with explaining why some organisations like the idea so much. Suffice to say, the people who support it are never electrification engineers. Now, I know people don't take a lot of notice of my opinion. There's the cover. But I do hope that the harsh numbers in the article will show why I call it disingenuous electrification. It really is a con trick, and more likely to stop proper electrification than to be a stepping stone towards it. Well, that's it for this month. I hope you enjoyed the magazine, and see you next time. Bye!
Visit www.modernrailways.com for more interesting and essential information about the British Railway Network.